Hi, hello. So we saw earlier how to create actions, view components, record field components. Now it's time to see how we can integrate adapt components. So we saw, for example, when we created the record field view component that we are leveraging BMC out of the box component, which is Rx only read-only field. So if we look at the module, we can see that we actually import this read-only field module, and we have also this adapt Rx text field, which is coming from adapt. So how can we do that? Because that's the way we prefer you to use components. So for example, if you want to use a star rating component, like this one, okay, maybe not this one, maybe this one, you don't need to code this component because adapt already gives you this component, so you don't need to recode it or use a third-party library. So we are going to see in this very quick example how we can leverage these kind of things. So what we are going to do is create a view component. So like always, be sure that you are in the right, you declare the Rx SDK environment variable. So that should point to your SDK. So which is, this one is one for 2105, and if it's not the case, you can use set Rx SDK and the path to the SDK. So the content of the SDK should be something like this. And of course, if you are on Mac, you should do export Rx SDK instead of set. So that's in the documentation. So once we are here, what we are going to do is we are going to create a new view component for our example. So we are going to use the commands that we saw for view components. So it's going to be yarn run ngg rx view component, and we are going to call it sample star component. We're going to use dry run to check that everything is fine, nothing weird. Seems so. So it's a dry run, so I didn't create anything. So I'm going to remove the dry run. So this time it's for real. And it created my view component. Sample field, sample star component. So for this one, I don't want to create like an input parameter or these kind of things. I really want just to show you how you can leverage a component from adapt, for example. So here, let's say that I want to display exactly like I have here. So I have this star rating component, and I want to see it in design time and runtime. So how would I do that? So I would go here. So here I have my icon from the wall. I don't really want that. I want star rating. So what I'm going to do, of course, you will need to access the documentation from adapt. And if you did so, you would know that the component for that is adapt Rx rating. So I'm going to do this. And you can see that WebStorm that I'm using, but I guess VS Code is going to do the same thing. It's going to complain and say, well, you're using a component, but you never imported the Angular module. So let's do that. But before doing that, let's push everything to Git so we can see exactly what's going to happen. Okay, so now let's see, it's complaining. So I'm going to, because I'm very lazy, I'm going to rely on WebStorm. I'm going to say, you know what? Well, let's just do it. Okay, I was a bit surprised because it's displayed a bit differently, maybe because it's a beta version of WebStorm. So anyway, it imported the module. The module that was important was adapt module. So two files have been modified. One of them has been modified by me, and one file has been modified by WebStorm. And you can see that it imported inside our view component module the adapt Rx rating module, which is correct. That's what we want. It just I was very surprised the way it was done. So here we have some parameters that we need to set for our view component, our component to work. So we need to pass some parameters. So we have quite a lot of them. So if you need to refer to the documentation of adapt to know what is necessary. So here you have size, you will have the style, we don't need it, we have required, we have the label. The label is going to be, here's the label. We need, okay, let's do something. So we have an event on the right change, which is when the user is going to click on something, on one of the stars. So we are going to handle that. We are going to call it on the same thing. So on right change, passing the event. So we need, of course, to implement it in our component. So it's going to be a value that should be a number returning nothing. And we are just going to display it inside the console. We are not going to do anything special with it. So here we have the size. So for the size, we need to set the size to something. So let's put it to, that's a good question. Let's put it to MD. Actually, let's not set the size, it's going to be by default. And of course, we need to set a value, and the value that is going to be set, we need something like ng model, and it's going to be, I don't know, star value. So the star value needs to exist, of course. And here we go. So that should be fine. So here we are with our design time. Let's see what happens when we build and send it to Innovation Studio. So we are going to deploy, we are going to build and deploy the application. So I'm going to do that, launch this command, I will pause the recording, and I will resume the recording once the deployment is done. Okay, so the bundle is deployed. Let's try to create a new view for star rating. So test star rating. Let's see if we have our components. So sample star component. We have, here is a label, and you can see here that we have our star component from adapt. So here I need to put a message, which, because it's a required parameter, it's not very important in our use case. So let me save the view, and let's see what happens when I look in the console. So let's display it properly. So let's see what happens when I select a value. You see that when I select a value, I have the value displayed inside the console, because that's what I did. When I did on write change, we are going to call this method, and this method is going to display the value that the user clicked on. So as you could see, it's very easy to use and adapt component. You should just use a component and rely on your IDE to import the correct module. And most of the time that's enough. Sometimes, on some occasion, you would have to import the module as root for root, but that would be in the documentation. By default, usually it's just enough to let your IDE do the job for you.